Good afternoon. Today's topic of discussion is going to be the national real estate market update with a specific spin on how that's impacting the Las Vegas housing market for March 2014. I'm Dale Snyder with the Snyder Group, team-driven real estate at Keller Williams Realty here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Before we get started, I have a list of data I want to go through with you that's going to give the national trends, and we're going to spin that to what we're seeing locally. Keep in mind, Las Vegas is accelerated. What we're seeing nationally is what we saw last year. We're in a different market than most parts of the country right now. I coach a lot of top-level agents around the country, and one thing that I'm noticing is they are experiencing exactly what we experienced a year ago. So before we jump right in, I also want to note that the information, the resources for the data I'm going over will be in the description below in the video. So you'll be able to look at the references to see where the sources are for the data I'm providing. And one thing I'd like to point out, I've really trimmed this data down to just give you some bite-sized pieces. If you would like more information about the national data and how it's impacting us locally, please reach out to me. I'd love to have an educated consultation with you to go over this information. All right, so let's jump right in. First, this slide is great because it shows pending home sales by the NIR from last January up to this January, well, 2 years back actually. The trend line there shows when we're at a healthy, stable market. This is important because what you're going to be hearing, if you're watching the news or online, going to the different media sources, they're going to be talking about how sales are down. So as you'll see from this next slide, existing home sales, if you look at the sales, they are down as well. One of the most important things that I think we all need to acknowledge and realize is that sales are down because inventory was so tight, there wasn't product to sell. There were 20 buyers for each property. So if you're doom and gloom or optimistic, kind of depends on your style, but if you look at the raw data and be emotional about your decision, you will logically come to the conclusion that a low supply is why we had a low amount of sales. I think that's an important thing to note because that's not what you're going to hear from other real estate professionals and from the media as a whole. It's either doom and gloom or it's a heyday, one or the other, right? Okay, you'll see by this next slide what we've seen by region for sales. We were down the most in the West, and what we're seeing in the West is our inventory starting to go up. And I'm talking more Arizona, Nevada. The coastal areas of California and stuff, a little different, but their inventory is going up as well in a lot of those markets. Midwest, Northeast, and South, they're starting to see tightening inventory, but their sales were up because they had more inventory. Okay, this next slide is a very important slide. When you look at the percentage of distressed property sales, keep in mind in Nevada, specifically in Las Vegas, we had some legislation that bottlenecked the foreclosure process and slowed down our inventory of distressed properties. But we still saw about a 20-30%, I think it's 25 off the top of my head, percentage of our sales were distressed. So we still are burning through a lot of distressed inventory. So no, the banks aren't going to flood the market, and we're not going to see 5,000 short sales hit the market in 1 month. They're going to slowly keep trickling them out like they had been. But the important thing here, nationally, it made up about 15%. So that's where we want to keep our mindset, is the national trend here. So when you look at that, that's a huge change. 35%. Last year, 23, January of this year, 15% of the sales. Okay, by this next slide, you will see that the non-distressed sales are still up. So look at January of 13 compared to January of 14. We have still seen an increase in the non-distressed sector. That's the most important point here to make, because the distressed inventory nationally is being absorbed, and we're seeing an increase in the non-distressed sales and a decrease in the distressed sales. And I'm going to tie this all together in a moment with some of the other reasons why we're not seeing as many sales as we had in previous years. So keep in mind, when I say non-distressed, what I mean by that is it's a traditional sale. You're not missing your mortgage payments. It's not a bank-owned home. It is a traditional sale, just to clarify there. Okay, this next slide here, my first thought, I'm always skeptical being a scientist with a background in geology and the sciences. I always look at data from a pessimistic perspective at first to see how did they present and come up with this. So if you look at the bottom of this slide, from 0 to 100K we're down 19%, and the million plus and above we're up 37.5%. Well, obviously in the lowest price range we're going to see a decrease, and we're going to see an increase in the higher price points because prices have gone up drastically. In Vegas, for example, we've gone up 35%. Like, you can't even find stuff below 100K really unless you're looking for condos. So this data may not be the most relevant, just being transparent and open with you here. But what is important, and we are seeing, is luxury sales are up drastically nationally, and that impacts us because we're such a globally based economy. We've seen a big increase in luxury sales, especially what I like to call luxury in that $500,000 to $1 million. That's a lot of semi-custom homes, so that's really entry-level luxury. We're seeing a huge increase in sales there, and that's driven a lot by the transitional sellers, people looking to move up or move down, and the out-of-state people that have been selling off their luxury products and diversifying, buying a place in Vegas, place in Maui, for example. So in summary to this video segment, this is a part one of a three-part segment. We talked about the distressed inventory, we talked about the non-distressed, we talked about pending sales and sales. The next segment of this video is going to be talking about who's going to be backfilling the investors pulling out of the markets. So make sure to catch part two.